The words you are about to hear are not the words of man, but the words of God. And so they are spirits and they are life. They have the power of God in them to change your heart, to heal your body, and to transform any situation in your life. All you need to do is believe. So open your hearts, absorb the energy of God, and expect the life of God in His words to do miracles in you as you listen.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the podcast. We're looking at God's compassion, the fact that God is moved with compassion. What Jesus shows us about the Father is that the Father is always moved with compassion. As far as God is concerned, the sin of man does not attract His wrath. Instead, it attracts His compassion. I repeat, as far as God is concerned, the sin of man does not attract God's wrath. It attracts His compassion. I'm going to read from Matthew chapter 9. And I'm going to read from verse 10. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" Meaning, this isn't proper, this is not right. Why is he eating with the people who should be repulsive to him, with the people who are against God, with the people who are sinners and who should be punished? Verse 12, on hearing this, Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick." But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but the sinners. What do we see here? God in the flesh goes in the midst of sinners. God in the flesh goes where sin is most. God in the flesh goes where people who have been written off gather. God in the flesh mixes in with sinners, doesn't run away from them. God in the flesh doesn't say, "Touch me not, for I am holy. I am of God. I am the chosen one. Do not touch me." God in the flesh doesn't say that. God in the flesh does not say, "Oh, you sinners, I have come to punish you and to bring justice upon you." What does God in the flesh do? He eats with sinners. What does he say? He says, "It is not the healthy that need a doctor, but it is the sick." So what do you do with the sick? Do you punish the sick for being sick? No. You take care of the sick. So what does man's sin elicit in God? Compassion. When God is moving, why does he move? Compassion. What moves God? Compassion. The way God sees it is different than the way man sees it. And this is what we see in Jesus. So I'm going to go back to Genesis. Again, we're going to go to chapter 18. And I'm going to look at what God says about Sodom and Gomorrah. Verse 20, 18:20, Genesis 18:20. Then the Lord said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin is so grievous. So you have Jesus amongst the tax collectors and the sinners. Now you have God the Father amongst the sinners of Sodom. If Jesus is a faithful image, then it should be the same thing. And Jesus is a faithful image, so it is the same thing. So what is God saying about Sodom and Gomorrah? Let us read. Then the Lord said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin so grievous, that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know. Why do I want to see if it's as bad? Why am I concerned that the sin is so grievous? Because it means that they are very sick. If the outcry against them is so great, it means they are very sick. And if their sin is so grievous, it means they're very sick indeed. So I need to go down in a hurry. Because when people are very sick, what do? You rush them to the emergency room. What do? You rush to them to give them the best care. What do? You prioritize them and give them your best medicines. You give them your best doctors. You give them your best care. That is what you do when you have people who are very sick. So what is God saying to Abraham? God is saying to Abraham, Sodom and Gomorrah is very sick indeed. I need to go down to see what's going on. God was not saying, I am going to Sodom and Gomorrah to destroy it. God was not saying, the outcry against them is so great, I'm going to see, and if it's great, I'm going to destroy them. No. How do we know this? Jesus makes it clear. Who needs a physician? The sick. So the same way you saw Jesus amongst the tax collectors and the sinners is the reason that God was going to Sodom. Jesus was spending time with the tax collectors and sinners. God was spending time in Sodom. God was going there to do what? To eat and drink with them. So please do not ever find yourself questioning, why would God be eating and drinking with them? Because that's exactly the same thing the Pharisees said. Why would Jesus be eating and drinking with them? They're the worst of the worst. These were the worst of the worst, yes. And they are exactly the people to whom God is moved with compassion. I'm going to read verse 23. Then Abraham approached him and said, will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of 50 righteous people in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. This is Abraham talking, not God. God did not say, I'm going to destroy. God did not say, I'm going to kill anyone. This is Abraham. Remember, God said, let us make man in our image and after our likeness. Let them rule. Let them have dominion. So who decides what happens on earth? Man. What happens in heaven is what God wills. What happens on earth is what man wills. So when God wants to move with compassion, he needs to find a man willing to move with compassion to the same degree. The man that God found was Abraham. Abraham was having compassion on Sodom and Gomorrah, but not to the same degree that God was having compassion. That is why Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. Sodom and Gomorrah will not have been destroyed if Abraham was a truer image. I know this might shake your theology, but this is scripture. This is truth. This is Jesus. If Abraham understood God better, if Abraham saw God more clearly and copied God more faithfully, Sodom and Gomorrah would not have been destroyed. God does not see sinners and think destruction. God sees sinners and thinks love. God sees sin and thinks, let me help. God sees the worst of us and think, what can I do to help? What can I do to save? How can I comfort you? How can I bind up your wounds? How can I help you? How can I be there for you? God's heart aches for us. His heart is full of compassion. He is moved with the thing. He is moved with compassion. And he came to the Garden of Eden. He was moved with compassion. You see, Adam's eating of the fruit, Eve's eating of the fruit would have been a traumatic experience. Because suddenly they were naked. They had not had that kind of experience where they were naked and ashamed. They never had that. That was new. It must have been fearful, traumatic, worrisome, anxiety-inducing. And God was coming to comfort them, not to beat them over the head, not to punish them, but to forgive them, to comfort them, to help them, to bind them up. And that is what God was planning to do with Sodom. Why was Sodom destroyed? Because there was no man that had a clear enough vision of God that could communicate God's compassion to Sodom. You say, how do you know this? This sounds too good to be true. It's not too good to be true. Jesus himself said it. So let's look at it in Matthew chapter 11. Matthew chapter 11. I'm going to read verse 23. So listen very carefully. Jesus is talking. And you, Capernaum, will you be lifted to the heavens? No, you will go down to Hades. Listen, Capernaum was one of the places, obviously, that Jesus taught, that Jesus worked, that Jesus performed miracles. For if the miracles that were performed in you had been performed in Sodom, it would have remained to this day. There you have it. So right now, there is no Sodom and Gomorrah. Jesus is saying there would still be Sodom and Gomorrah if the miracles that were performed in Capernaum in his day would have been performed in Sodom and Gomorrah in their day. What does he mean by that? He means if the signs and evidences of God's compassion had been shown to them to the degree and in the magnitude that they had been shown in Capernaum, the people of Sodom would have seen God more clearly and would have changed their minds about God. Very clear. So whatever it is that you've thought about God that is not consistent with this, you have to change. The human mind has a tendency to think that God is evil because the enmity in the human mind is against God. That's why Adam ran away. So when God is coming to have compassion, what happens to man? Man runs away. Man runs away. And so man forfeits his compassion. What Jesus wants, what the Father wants, is for man to run to him. God is having compassion. Man needs to see that God is having compassion and receive the compassion of God and pass on the compassion of God. I'm going to read two more scriptures very quickly. John chapter 3. Verse 19. This is the verdict. Light has come into the world. When it says light, it means compassion. It means the mercy of God. Light has come into the world, but people loved darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. People would rather wrath and anger rather than compassion and mercy. Why? Because they want other people to suffer, because their deeds were evil. Verse 20, everyone who does evil hates the light. Yeah. If you want people to suffer, you hate the light. If you want people to suffer, you don't want mercy to reign. So he says, everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God. God is having compassion. Romans chapter 4 talks about God who justifies the ungodly. God is having compassion. This is God as we see him in Jesus. Thank you very much. God bless you.